I'm St-Hilaire, and in this video we're going to take a look at the basics of MeshCentral configuring 802.1x in AMT. So this is going to be quite a special technical video, but we're going to take a look at configuring 802.1x inside Intel AMT. And so the first thing I want to take a look at is what is 802.1x. So I have a few slides here. Obviously, if you don't use 802.1x, probably something you don't have to worry about. If you do, 802.1x is a way for port authentication or network access to mostly corporate networks. So when you connect to a corporate network in a large organization, you don't use a Wi-Fi password like a SSID and password, because there's a couple of flaws with this. Obviously, every employee or every member of the organization would have the same password and username, and if somebody leaves the organization, you can't remove their credentials, like everybody has the same one. So you want to fix that, and one way to do this is 802.1x, which is a protocol that allows you to have to authenticate before you get access to the network. And this works over wired and wireless. So you can have an Ethernet port in the wall that requires 802.1x access before you can, browse the internet and access the network, or you can do that over wireless. In fact, it's commonly used over wireless in large companies. Okay. So basically the way it works is you set up your computer with a set of credentials. You connect to some kind of router, either wired or wireless. The router will allow you to talk to this thing called a radius server, and you'll have to authenticate to it. And once the radius server is happy, it will send a packet back to the router saying unlock and grant network access. So now, why is MeshCentral concerned about 802.1x? Usually it's something you configure in the operating system, and MeshCentral's like the Mesh Agent or MeshCentral Assistant or MeshCentral Router wouldn't have to worry about it. But in our case, we also support Intel AMT, Active Management Technology, and Intel AMT can be enabled on your device even when your operating system is sleeping. So what's going on is that your operating system is not logging into a network port, and now AMT is on its own, and it has to log in using 802.1x to the network in order to gain access to allow remote management of the device. So what we're going to do is we're going to have MeshCentral configure Intel AMT with 802.1x credentials, and just a little bit like the OS, your OS would have configured by the domain controller, we are going to have MeshCentral do that. And then once AMT is configured with those credentials, of course, it will be able to unlock the network port. Now, for the purpose of this demonstration in this video, we're going to oversimplify a few things. And the first thing I'm going to do is use JumpCloud as my radius server. So I'm going to use, normally you would set up a radius server somewhere on your network, but to make it easy on myself, JumpCloud has a service where you can, for free, create up to 10 users and use their radius server. So I'm just going to use that as my radius server in the cloud. It's like on the internet. So I'm going to configure a DD-WRT, an old router that I have, to talk to the JumpCloud radius server. And then I'm going to set up the right things inside MeshCentral so that it can configure AMT with the right configuration so that AMT will be able to go through. So about a month ago, I already started enhancing MeshCommander and MeshCentral so that I could easily debug 802.1x profiles. So if you look at the AMT tab or MeshCommander, you can click on the network settings tab. This is an old screenshot here, but you'll be able to go in the wired interface or in the wireless profiles, and you'll be able to configure 802.1x. And you'll be able to delete an 802.1x profile or take a look at it. And this was important because before I start work on MeshCentral to configure these profiles automatically. It's great to have all the debug tools available. And of course, this is great for you to see if your AMT machines are configured correctly. So you just connect using MeshCommander or MeshCentral, go to the Network Settings tab, and you should be able to see your 802.1x profiles if they're set. Okay. Now, another simplification we're going to do for this video is that I am going to set up a single username and password inside the Radius server, and I'm going to configure all these. I'm going to configure a single profile with that username and password, and it is going to be configured or set on all the AMT machines that you have. So this is not ideal, but for the purpose of this oversimplified video, that's what we're going to do. We're just going to create one username and password, set it inside MeshCentral, and have MeshCentral basically give all these AMT devices the same username and password to log into the device. So we're not going to use certificates. We're going to use a super, super simple system here. And so the way we're going to do it is we are going to go into JumpCloud, set it up. We're going to set up our network switch that's actually in the middle here to communicate with JumpCloud, and then we're going to go and set up MeshCentral so that MeshCentral can set up AMT. And the way we're going to do it is we are going to go inside the config.json file, and actually once we have, of course, JumpCloud set up and our network switch set up, we'll go inside the config.json file of MeshCentral, and we will set up a simple example here, which is a 802.1x profile that will be used for wired, and then we will have two Wi-Fi profiles that we'll set in AMT, and one of them will have 802.1x, and so this Wi-Fi profile will use the username and password that is in the 1x profile here. It will just use that. Okay, so let's get started. The first thing I want to do is go onto JumpCloud. So I'm going to go drop this down, and the first thing I want to do is go to JumpCloud. Now this is the administrator portal for JumpCloud. So if you just log in and create an account, you have users of the JumpCloud portal where you can grant users different services and access and so on, but you can also access the administrator portal, and this is what I have here. So you can see various things. I've used this in the past, but one of the things is Radius right here. You can click on that. And I've already set up one Radius server or one Radius instance. But basically, all you do is you say plus, you type in the name, you type in the IP address. This is the IP address that your switch will be contacting JumpCloud on. So, that's the IP address that, and basically the reason why they need this is because this is how they're going to know that this is your switch and to apply your account versus some other switch from somebody else. So you put the name, you put your external IP address that the switch will be reaching out to JumpCloud on, and then you have a shared secret that you will be configuring in the switch. So you do that, and then the other thing is user groups. It's important here. I put all users. Of course, I'm going to use myself as a user, but you can select which users will have access through your switch. In my case, I just put all. Okay, so that's it. So I'm going to X out of here. I already have my my MeshCentral testing, all done, and I have my secret here that I took note of when I set this up. Okay, so this is pretty simple. I'm going to bring out some notes that I have. Let's see here. There you go. I'm going to bring out some notes just so you guys follow. So the first thing we've done is we've take a look at the JumpCloud portal, and we configured it. And then the other thing to note, and it's not super clear from their instructions, but the port that you need to contact JumpCloud on for Radius services is port 1812. And then they have 4 IP addresses, one on US East, one US West, one Europe, and one for Asia. So I'm going to use the US West one right here to configure my switch. So my switch is going to contact basically this IP address on this port. It's going to use the shared secret that I grabbed on the website, and that's all it needs. So okay, now I have a really old DD-WRT router, and actually what I'm going to do is just show it. So this is, like, I don't know if you guys remember, this is a 802.11g router, and you could flash these with DD-WRT, which is an open source firmware. And so once flashed, you could, it had radius support built in. So I just used that. Now I'll go back to my desktop here, and I'm going to bring up my DD-WRT web page. So this is the web page. Let me just go back to setup here. So status. So normally when you hit the web page, this is what you see. But when you go to wireless, you can set up. You can click on the settings. You can go on wireless security, and different routers will have their own web pages with their own thing. But basically, they're all kind of the same. You will select WPA2 or WPA3 Enterprise. So the Enterprise means basically you're going to have network access control through a radius server. The algorithm, I always pick AES. Then the IP address that the switch will be connecting to, this is the JumpCloud IP address. This is the one I showed earlier. Let's see, right here. So it's a US West one. And then I put the port 1812. The shared secret, this is the one that I grabbed off the JumpCloud portal. And that's it. Of course, in addition to this, you have your basic settings where you set your SSID as usual. But the big difference here is that I don't set a password. There's no Wi-Fi password. Instead, we're going to use the radius server to do the authentication. Okay, so once your switch is done, one thing that wasn't clear to me is, okay, well, how do I test this to make sure everything's working? And one thing I suggest is there's a tool called NTRadPing, and that's a little utility that allows you to check to see if JumpCloud is responding correctly. This will only test JumpCloud. It won't test your switch. But here I have my shared secret. This is the one off of the JumpCloud server. I have the radius server port. Now I'm using US East here, but I can use US West. It doesn't really matter. Both work, but I'm going to use US West. And then the port 1812. Then the username and the password. So if I put the wrong username and I say send, you'll see it'll pause a little bit and it will say access rejected. That means that the radius servers say, nope, you're no good. But here I'm going to put my name and my correct password, and I'm going to say send. And as soon as I send it correctly, it will say response accepted. So this is nice because it just confirms that your radius server, in this case JumpCloud, works correctly. And also it tells you, what username and password to use. So in my case, it wasn't clear, like, do I use the email address? What username do I use when I use radius as JumpCloud as a radius server? And in this case, it was with a few tries on this tool, I was able to find my username, and of course the password is the one I use for JumpCloud. Okay, so now that this is accept, that means JumpCloud is working. I have my switch working. Wonderful. So the next step. Now that I've configured my DD-WRT router, what you could do is you could set up your DD-WRT router or whatever router you have, and then you try to connect it using a normal computer, and if just a normal laptop or something. And then it will pop you and prompt you for a username and password. You type the one that you have for JumpCloud, and it will work. That will demonstrate that both JumpCloud and the switch work. Okay, next is the MeshCentral configuration. Now, I won't go in my config.json, but basically in the domain section of the MeshCentral config.json, you'll add a section called AMT Manager. The AMT Manager part has basically lots of configuration in how you want MeshCentral, handling AMT. And so one thing you're going to do here is you're going to configure your 802.1x profile. You're going to say what protocol you want AMT to authenticate using. And so if you're going to use a username and password, then this MSChapv2 protocol is the one you should use. Because it works with JumpCloud, it works with AMT, so I tested it, it works great. And then you put your username and password here. And so if you just do this and nothing else, then when MeshCentral will configure your AMT machine as every machine that has a wired interface, then it will create an 802.1x profile and just put the username and password. So very nice and simple. If you have Wi-Fi profiles in addition to this, then you can set up your Wi-Fi profile. Now, a normal Wi-Fi profile like WPA2 PSK here, you'll have just a Wi-Fi password, like a normal Wi-Fi password that you would typically use. But if you are using a WPA2 802.1x, which is the obviously radius authenticated access, then you don't need to provide a password. But as soon as you use 1x here, this information from the wired interface will also be used for this profile. So that's it. And here the profile, I put a name, but if you omit this, if you don't do it a name, then the SSID is the name of the profile. So in this case, I could have removed this and it would have worked fine. Okay, so I set this inside MeshCentral. Here's my MeshCentral server. It's been already configured with this setting. I'm going to open the web page here. I'm going to go to my MeshCentral server, and I am going to, now what I've done is I've already set up a device group, lab computers, to configure AMT on. So if you click here, it has, in my case, it has simple ACM, but you could do full automatic, and that would work too. And so once that's set, every time a computer, an agent connects or to MeshCentral, then the agent will take a look at the configuration of AMT, make sure everything is okay. So in this case, I have an AMT machine over here. This is an AMT 15, version 15 machine, and I have my AMT tab. I can click connect. I'm going to connect using my AMT tab here. Let's see if this works. There, perfect, works fine. And so this is the entire configuration of my AMT machine. I'm going to go to network settings, and you're going to see that MeshCentral already set up my machine with 802.1x right here, and I have MSChapv2, which is the username and password. I can click on it, and you can see the username. This is actually the username I used in the config, so Alien4 here for my testing. And then at the bottom here, you'll see the two profiles. And if I can bring back up my notes, so the two Wi-Fi profiles right there, they are right here. And one of them, the top one, if I click on it, it has username, it has 802.1x authentication, MSChapv2, and the username is Alien4. So what I did is I actually put Alien4 right there. So for the purpose of my demonstration here. Okay, so in order to demonstrate that MeshCentral is setting up these profiles correctly, what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete them. So I'm going to say disabled. There you go. So I removed the 802.1x on the wired interface, and I'm just going to remove the two Wi-Fi profiles. There you go. Perfect, all removed. Now I'm going to go in the console. Don't update this. And so this is the agent console where you can do a bunch of commands, and I'm going to do AMT config enter. So this is going to tell the agent to go ahead and perform a reconfiguration of AMT right now. Now, this is done usually fully automatically when the agent first connects, but here I'm forcing it to do it again, and you'll see that it added 2 Wi-Fi profiles and also added the 802.1x profile. So I'm going to go back to the AMT tab, hit refresh on the network tab, and you're going to see 802.1x was set up, and you're going to see the 2 Wi-Fi profiles were set up. And so that's it. I did personally use my DD-WRT router that I have right here. Let's see, I did use this router and I tested it. What I did is I made sure that the operating system did not sign up authenticate using Radius. Instead, I shut off the network port and shut off the network driver, and I let AMT authenticate to the switch on its own, and I was then able to access AMT's webpage and ping the device and so on. So it did confirm that the entire operation worked correctly. Now, in the future, we will be setting up 802.1x with a much more complicated system where we're going to have to integrate with the back end so that we give each AMT device different credentials or different certificates to authenticate to the Radius server. In that case, we'll be able to monitor who's authenticating to our network switches, and we also be able to revoke these certificates if we want to kick a machine out of our network. Anyway, hopefully that was useful, a little technical, but for a large organization, this is an absolute must. Thank you very much. Have a great day.